Right, good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Cilla Ross. I'm principal of the Co-operative College, but in some ways, more importantly today, I'm hosting this workshop for CCIN. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you. I hope you've had a great morning in conference. And it must be quite weird. I love going to conferences, so I don't know what it's like being in a virtual one, but I hope it's been okay for you. What I'd like to do now is start our presentation. So I'm going to share the screen and tell you a little bit about what we're going to do over the next hour. Right, welcome back. Now you can see the slides, I hope. So what we're doing in our workshop is we're asking a question, or we'll carry on sort of making a statement in a way. What we'll be exploring is what cooperative education can do for you and for your council. And as I said, I'm actually hosting it, but it's with great pleasure that I'm also inviting Helen, Chicot and her colleagues in the place team, Kate and Luci, who will be actually taking you through a great example really of their work. And you know, you'll get a real sense of whether you can actually answer that question or respond to that question later on in the workshop. But I wanted to begin by just saying a little bit of why I would always say that cooperative education can do a great deal for you. And my colleagues Amanda and Angela from the Co-operative College are on this call and will be taking you through a fringe event later, is that we think cooperative education is so important and is so distinctive as a learning approach that we believe it can do the following. And I don't want to spend too long on it because a lot of you will have given some thought to this. But cooperative education, cooperative learning, when we think about it, it's the content of what we do. So it's about starting cooperatives, building cooperatives, acting cooperatively, being a cooperative council. But it's also a particular learning approach, how you actually do that learning according to the values. And of course, that's the thing that makes cooperative education so distinctive. And it does all sorts of things within any setting, as you'll see. Not only does it develop skills and capabilities, which you would expect and hope, but it also develops those really important identity pieces, which are absolutely instrumental to being a cooperator. And I think perhaps as important now in this very challenging time in which we're in, what it also does is help us to think about different ways of organising, of working, of thinking about how we are as a community. And of course, particularly critical for us and exciting for us at the college, and I know Helen and the team are going to say something more, is our commitment to co-production. So it's a very democratic approach. And I have to say, we're using the word in its true, authentic way. In other words, we really, truly believe, because we are a values-based organisation with a values-based approach, that we actually take co-production very seriously. So what I'd like to do now, Helen, is hand over to you and look forward to rejoining you at the end of this, when we'll probably have an open discussion across the whole workshop in answer to a question. So thanks, Helen. I'll stop sharing the screen now.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm really pleased to be here today. Given that there's not very many of us, I think it'd be quite helpful for me to know who we've got here, just so that we can maybe talk to some of your priorities a little bit. So it'd be really helpful if you could introduce yourselves and tell us which council you're from and what you're particularly interested in here today. Shall we start with Paul? Oh, there's two Pauls. Sorry. Paul Stewart.
I think he's muted. No, can't hear you.
Sorry, that was my fault. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hey. Technology. Right, it's Councillor Paul Stewart from Sunderland City Council, and actually I'm on tomorrow's session about community wealth building, and one of the important aspects of that is the council itself and the how we educate the staff within the council about our values as a cooperative council. And I suppose it's a case of I'm interested in that, because clearly it's a line that we'll need to take as part of developing our community wealth building, because unless we can actually have the staff within the council believing what we're doing, then we've already got one hand tied behind our backs in that sense.
Right. Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. And Paul Morris?
Oh, morning everyone. I'm Paul Morris. I'm an Economic Development Officer in Glasgow City Council. I'll save a lot of time here. I'm really here to look and listen. You may have noticed in the publication that was on yesterday that we've got 2 case studies there. I'm responsible for pulling together one of them and for tracking down the other. So I suppose I'm following on from Paul Stewart here in being interested in how we can disseminate and promote cooperative working across the council and beyond.
Great, thank you. And Georgina?
Hiya, I'm a policy officer at North Herts District Council, and so I'm really interested in, we kind of took part in the CCIN learning set, and I'm interested in kind of what other people have to say as well. Yeah,
Brilliant. And Patrick?
Hello, I'm from Economic Development Manager, Plymouth City Council. Basically, we produce the latest policy lab, Unleashed from the Grassroots, Growing Cooperative Economy. Really interested in how we can sort of be encourage ambassadors right across services of the council. Obviously, we've been leading from economic development, but lots of other services of the council, and I think it's really important that we all right across the council embrace cooperative values and principles. So really listening, really wanting to learn from this workshop session.
Fabulous, thank you. It feels really rude for me to not give Manda and Angela an opportunity as well, so please say hi.
Hi, I'm Angela Colebrook. I'm the Learning and Development Manager from the Cooperative College, and Amanda and I are running one of the fringe sessions afterwards as well. We work closely with Cilla.
So I'll just say I'm Amanda. I am the Curriculum Development Officer currently at the college, and I do a lot of work with Cilla and Angela, and also have done in the past, quite a bit of work around the sort of placemaking and stuff in Rochdale. So very interested in the subject as well.
Thank you. So yeah, that just gives me a little bit of focus for what I'm going to talk about. And what's really interesting is that Kate, Lucy and I have worked together for many years, and we've all come into the neighbourhoods directorate of our council in Rochdale via economic development. And we have almost all of you are interested in some way in economic development. So maybe we can speak to that a little bit as we're going through. So yeah, so I'm going to sort of talk to you a little bit about bringing to life some of the stuff that Cilla was referring to, with some evidence of how cooperative education has made a difference in Rochdale. And I think the sort of the main point I'd like to make with that is that we're quite I guess, well, we're very sort of passionate about education, and quite militant about it in a way as a right. When you think about education and the opportunity to learn as a right, all of a sudden, all that cooperative value stuff really becomes very, very obvious. If you see it as a thing you do that increases your employability or gives you a qualification, you don't necessarily see it through that same light. But to me, where things go wrong, where you see failure in the system, there is an absence of learning and of education. And when you think about it like that, it must be cooperative, because it's all about that kind of understanding who you are as a person, your insights, what you bring to the world and what the world can bring to you. And it's that civic role of education that really comes into play there. So to kind of bring that to life and describe what I mean a little bit, I'll tell you just a tiny bit about what we do. So Lucy, Kate and I work in the place teams in Rochdale Council, which is part of the Greater Manchester agenda around reform and integration. We're very deliberately in the neighbourhoods team and not in the teams that have got statutory functions like care or police or housing or whatever, although we work incredibly closely with those teams. our commitment is to the place, the neighbourhoods that we work in, and our job, basically, it sounds quite negative, but our job is to prevent failure and try and reduce the impacts of failure. So that is where we end up with cases in neighbourhoods where we've got, you know, time and time again, waste of opportunity, waste of money, and things not going right for people, where we've got families where things just seem to keep going wrong all the time. So we use the language of the police, and they talk about failure demand, which is where you just have case after case coming through and they can't do what they're there to do. They're there to kind of protect, and they're not able to do that because of the nature of their work. And the reason why people are coming into that system is because of what they see as underlying issues like mental ill health or drug and alcohol use, etc. So our job is to kind of understand all of that, get underneath it, understand people as human beings in their own contexts, and work with them to make things better. And you can't do that without education. It's just not possible to do. And really, the system will see it as we kind of go in and help. But essentially, if you think about what help is, it has to be a combination of three things. Sometimes it has to be practical help. I'm going to get that sofa out of your garden and you are going to feel better. I'm going to help you get your water switched on. And then when you start to sort of unpick through, when you get through the practical issues into some of the more kind of causal, you know, the causes of the main problems, that's where learning really comes into play. So now I'm going to work with you to understand how to uncap your own gas. And then once you've learned that for yourself, you can then help your neighbours and you can help your family. You can become more confident. You know how to cook food for your family, all of those things. And it's done without blame. So it's not saying you should know how to do these things as an adult. It's saying, gosh, you've been really failed by a system that's not giving you these opportunities to learn stuff. And then the other bit of it is the emotional support that goes with it. So that's that, you know, absolutely blame-free. We are going to work with you and provide you with that kind of unconditional support. And we do that often in a very enforcement world. So we will do it with police officers, we'll do it with housing officers that are used to evicting people, to actually provide people with a space where they genuinely have got an opportunity to get their issues sorted out. So for that to happen in that way, with a kind of multidisciplinary team coming from all different backgrounds, the workforce has to see themselves as educators. And so a lot of the kind of workforce development stuff that we do, which some of you have asked about, is about understanding your role as a public servant, as an educator, and as a cooperative educator. So we also do have education provision in those neighbourhoods as well that people come to, and there, you know, there's classes when we're allowed to be out, and online when we're not. But actually, the workforce that is out there on the ground is crucial to that happening. We couldn't just put classes on, because what tends to happen in those class situations is you embed the curriculum, you embed people's lives into it, rather than what we do is we embed the curriculum into people's lives. So everything that the workforce do is an opportunity to learn. And so what I'm going to do is ask Lucy and Kate to tell us a little bit more about that through some of the actual cases that you work with. So is it okay to start with you, Lucy?
Telling everybody else to turn the mic off and I'm the first one not to do it. So I'm a place worker. Did we say what a place worker is? Helen sort of said we work in areas, different places around our town, and we work with some of the most complex cases. And I think that what we do is try to make learning and education relevant to what it is they need to do. Is that, would you say that's right, Helen? I think you'll only get people who don't see themselves as wanting to learn, interested in learning, unless it's relevant to what they need to do. And I think I sort of see myself as somebody who's got a little bit of lived experience where education is talked about. I wasn't somebody who went to university, and I was very shy of learning because I didn't think I could do it, and I wasn't smart and I wasn't clever. And actually, once I started to see that somebody told me I was doing well for the very little things that I didn't even think were learning, then I got really excited about it. So I like to cook and I like to garden. And when I got my first job, I was able to use those things in the day centre that I worked to show other people. And then I was quite good and I could teach somebody else. I started to think about learning differently because it was something that was helping me and benefiting me. And then I got really excited. And if you're good at something and somebody tells you you're doing well, then that makes you feel good. So you want to do more of it. And then if you can do it and you can show someone else how to do it and it's that straightforward, why would you not? And I think that's what we sort of do. People don't think they can do things. If they learn to do it, they feel better. If you teach them how to do it really easily, then they want to do more of it. And I think that's quite as simple as it is.
Luci,
Helen mentioned.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
just to remind you of that question of the difference in your mind between empowerment and learning that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think I work with lots of women, so we help and support a lot of women. When you don't feel that great about yourself, when somebody starts to say, I'm going to empower you to do these things and take control of your own life and empower you, and you're going to be really dynamic and do it really well. When you don't feel great, that just seems so far away that you're going to be this really strong woman who's going to be a feminist and empowered to do all these things. You think that's something you can't achieve. But if someone says, do you know what? I'm going to just show you a few things to do. I'm going to teach you a little bit and educate you to do those things better. You might just think, do you know what? If I just had a little go and someone helped me do that, I could do that. And those two things are still learning the same. It's just how you word it. It's a little bit different. And I think with people that don't feel great about themselves, if you say seeing it as education, I think somebody's going to get on far better. And then when they've learned a few things and you start to compare that it's just the same as somebody who's learning in a classroom environment and getting all those certificates and doing all those things, you can make people feel more equal balanced, I suppose. Because adult education really is quite a privilege, isn't it? You know, if to go to college or do a night school class, if that's what people think adult education is, and if that's not where you are in your life, that's quite a privileged thing to have, isn't it? And where the people I work with who are complex and are struggling getting by, that might be something they would never ever think they could achieve, when actually they're probably learning far more by doing it all day every day than somebody who just does it a couple of hours a week in a night class or whatever.
So it's kind of it's developing that self-efficacy and reflexive kind of approach that people can then see themselves as learners, so they start to identify as learners, and then they can progress into those classes.
Which
and
I was one of those people who just, you know, started to see that actually what I was doing was learning. And then I'm nearly 50 and you know, I'm doing it all the time, you know, because I want to read more and I've just done maths and, you know, things that I wouldn't have even thought if I hadn't carried on being hungry to learn more. And you can get people to want to learn, even if they've got very difficult, complex lives. You can make them excited about learning. Helen used the example of the gas uncapping. That was a woman that I was working with who her history was that she'd been involved in child sexual exploitation that nobody knew about. And she got 2 children of her own who were at the point when I was involved just became involved were on a child protection plan. I don't know if everybody knows what they are, but it's really boring levels of child protection, where when you get to the actual protection stage, the next stage is children being taken into care. And I went to the meeting where there was lots of actions set, and every action was needs to get the gas, isn't cooking hot meals because there's no cooker, needs to get the gas uncapped by the next meeting. And there was loads of other things. And I sat there and thought, oh, and then I took the action to help mum get gas uncapped. And then I thought, oh my God, gas uncapped. What does that mean? And she'd been, every time there'd been a meeting, mum had been downgraded or black tick in the box for not uncapping gas. And then I said, do you know how to, what's uncapping gas? And no, she didn't even know what it meant. And for any of you, I don't know if anybody knows how to uncap gas, but I didn't. And it requires so many different things to do, it's almost impossible. But we had so many weeks before next meeting, and if you don't uncap gas, then you get another tick in the box, and it goes on and on. Anyway, so we sat down and we learned together how to uncap gas. And we didn't I didn't do it for her, and then it was done. And so we learned all the steps to uncap gas, and we got gas uncapped. And then mum felt great. She'd learned how to uncap gas. The tick was in the box and it was done. But then as well, next time, there was a group of these mums that met at the Shore Start Centre, and this particular mum said, I can uncap gas. I learned how to do it. I can show you how to uncap gas. So then she felt better, everybody felt better, and that was just so easy of something that was like, nobody knew how to uncap gas, but let's get excited about uncapping gas rather than everybody getting a black cross in the box about
and
gas.
And laughing at the ridiculousness of it together as a peer group, and laughing at the fact that none of us can do it. So there's that sort of solidarity of we're all up against these problems and we're going to kind of work through it together.
And as well, me saying, I can't uncap gas. And actually, when I then got a bit more confident and I went back to the meeting, head social worker taking all the minutes at the meeting, I went, before I said we've uncapped gas, I said, do you know how to uncap gas? Let us tell you. We can uncap gas. So, sometimes things are there, aren't they? And they just seem like you can't do them. Well, nobody can. We've all got to learn it, haven't we?
Yeah, and that's that moment where the power genuinely does shift. And it's not an empowerment process. It's a point where the power is suddenly plonked with that person because they are now capable of doing this.
Yeah. And now, this particular mum, I still ring her now and say, do you know, have you got a few minutes on Tuesday? If I give this girl your number, she can give you a bell and you can tell her how to uncap gas. And we still joke about it now. But now she's the expert of uncapping gas who teaches everybody else how to uncap gas. Yeah. Along with lots of other things now that she's got really excited about learning, which... and children are not removed, families much happier, kids get hot meals because we've got gas, hallelujah, everybody happy.
Yeah. And it doesn't take much to think about the implications of how frustrating that is, to feel like, the system's telling me to do this thing. I don't really understand what's expected of me, but nobody's helping me to understand that. No. And that can then generate behaviour type issues. I'm going to bring Kate in at this point to just sort of briefly give us an example of how learning to kind of manage people to manage their own behaviour is an important part of this.
Yeah, I will be quick because I know obviously we're on a bit of a time scale, and normally I can talk till the cows come on, but I promise I won't. So the gentleman I work with has learning difficulties, and he also has autistic traits, and he doesn't have a concept of timescales. So when I initially started working with this young gentleman, and it was, right, okay, we've done this now, and they'll get back to us within 21 days or whenever. within 2 days, he was ringing me, frustrated. Why is it not happening? Anyway, a very good example, I feel, of how to help somebody to learn those things were the other day when I was speaking to him, and he started a new relationship. And usually when these new relationships start, things move very quickly in his life. Within a week, he loves them. Within 2 weeks, they're moving in. Within 3 weeks, he's upset and let down because everything's gone too quick, and he doesn't understand why that's all broken down. So what I did with him last week is he started a new relationship, and we had a conversation about timescales. And I thought the best thing to say to him was, okay, so let's look at what's going on. Let's look at the things that have gone wrong in the past and where we are today. Come Valentine's Day, when you're buying that Valentine's card, it's at that point when you maybe need to think about taking things to the next stage. So for me, the learning for that was a time in the future that he would remember, because we all know when that Valentine's Day is. And then he now knows that time scale from today till then, and he sees it as a longer distance. And that's the kind of thing sometimes a lot of the work that you do, you don't realize you're educating people. It's just the things that you do quite naturally, the things that maybe this young gentleman who went through the care system, who didn't have a fantastic mum in the background doing things, I suppose in that respect, I'm kind of replacing some of the skills his mum might have given him when he was growing up, if you like, that I'm now doing with him as an adult. But his autistic traits prevent him from having those timescale things. So by setting things that he can think of that are in the future, help him to learn those little life skills as well. I think that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, that's fab. And I mean, that's I kind of put Kate on the spot a bit there, because I overheard that interaction, and it was just a beautiful bit of learning to me. And so one of the things that I sort of see as my own role is pointing that out when people are doing that, noticing that. And across the team, that's something that's very common. We have regular kind of get-togethers, and in order for the workforce to keep being able to kind of do this work at this kind of level, they need that peer support to go, oh yeah, that was a great piece of education you just did there, and calling it out for what it is. Yeah.
And to recognize yourself as an educator as well. That's really important. Again, like with Lucy, school wasn't a positive experience for myself, and teachers and that kind of environments make me very nervous. And I never saw the work that I did as educating. But since I did, and since that penny dropped, it can be done in such natural environments and natural settings. And it can be something that almost is done via osmosis, if you like, to people. And then once you've done that once, you reinforce to them, that was brilliant. Look what you learned. Next time you do that, remember how you did it last time. And it's that kind of educating, rather than being sat there with a book that says, how do I manage my own time frames? It's actual on the job stuff that you can do with people, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah. And then in terms of the kind of workforce development models that support that, it's a lot of it is imposter syndrome busting. We're expected as workers to be able to deal with housing legislation, to be able to deal with childcare and child protection issues, safeguarding issues, all of these things that if people don't feel confident to deal with, they will sort of wither away, and that system can completely overwhelm. So it's part of the kind of morale maintenance and preventing burnout as well. And education is absolutely key to that across the workforce as well.
Well, I think we do quite a bit where we say it's okay not to know it yet. It's okay, because you can learn it. You can find out. We'll get there. And, you can know how to do that, but it's actually all right not to yet. But it's not that you don't know and you're never going to know. You just haven't learnt it yet, or you're just not fathomed a way around it yet.
Yeah. So I'll just give you a couple of stats and then we'll move into questions, because I'm sure many of you are thinking, well, this sounds wonderful, but how do we accommodate that? Yeah, in this world where we've got austerity and all of the challenges that we face. So in the first area that we started to do this was a place called Chicot, which is a small sort of population of about 3,000 to 5,000, and we kind of administrate things in populations of 30 to 50,000, and then we do place team work in the kind of the areas that need it the most. In that area, we undertook a cost benefit analysis, which was done by Manchester Metropolitan University, so that it was validated externally, and that revealed a £3.69 return for every pound invested, and that's fiscal return, which is the kind of economic and social returns were way beyond that, but this was the fiscal return in terms of cashable savings to the different components of the system. In that area, that fiscal return was very much coming from the investment, which was mostly the local council, and going into the DWP, because through those models and things that Lucy and Kate have described, people identified themselves as learners and progressed into education in the formal sense, and then lo and behold got jobs, and it was remarkable. And so we could see this steady flow of people coming out of positions of crisis and being seen as a problem by the system and high demand and all of that, going into independence, employment, etc. So then, full of confidence, we moved to a second area, which is the College Bank and Lower Faylinge area, which is more in the centre of Rochdale town. And that area had as much demand in terms of what the statistics tell us, but it also has got this absolutely enormous legacy of hidden demand that doesn't even get reported. And so if we only followed the stats, we probably wouldn't work there. But the reality is that actually sometimes people's lives they've been so used to sort of living on the margins of things, it doesn't even get through. And to illustrate that, the volume of people who have been living in persistent and extreme poverty, which the normal definition is 3 years or more, in that area we define it as 10 years or more, because they've just got used to living at that kind of way below the kind of poverty line. And it doesn't take a genius to kind of work out what the implications for that are. So in that area, it's a very different story, and often the workforce don't feel like they're getting forward in the same way they do as they do in Chicot. But the reality is that the savings are actually higher. So it's £4.13 for every pound invested. And also those savings land more in the sort of fiscal savings to parts of the system where we have more control. So those savings fall back into children's and adult services and those places where the money is really stretched. And the reason for that is usually prevented care costs. So you can attribute an intervention that Kate's done with that young man has actually prevented a care cost. And there's also been several examples of prevented early deaths as well, which is, obviously not what we intended and set out to do, but obviously makes a huge difference to people's lives. So those are the kind of stats. We've got papers and papers on this. We've got ethnography, we've got cost benefit analysis. So if people are geeky about that sort of stuff and you want evidence, just let me know.
Thank you, Helen. That's really salutary when you think about the people that you're working with day in, day out, but also some fantastic examples of how that Kate and Lucy both described, learning by doing, which is at the heart of cooperative learning and indeed of all good learning. So we were going to have an activity, but I'm mindful we've only got 8 minutes left because we do want to finish at 12. But has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask? But I suppose one thing I'd just like to start with is, what we're talking then is about a workforce who are working according to cooperative values, are informing their work, but your approaches are cooperative as well in how you're going about the work, and how do you think about those values when you're doing the work is probably what
it's that identity, being a cooperator. The solution lies in the work that we do with the people that we work with, but also the work we do with our colleagues in the system. And everybody understands cooperation as working together. They don't always understand it in that kind of economic sense and the kind of wider infrastructure that you need around it and the community wealth and all of that. But it's that reflection and taking the pieces of work that we do and understanding the story and the implications, and not just fixing that problem, but learning from that problem in terms of understanding what are the conditions in our system that are creating this problem, and we're fixing it in this little place, but actually there's so much that we could learn here about the world that people live in, and that then directs our reform agenda and strategic thinking and policy making.
I think as well, together we're stronger, you know, that if you're in it together, you're stronger to achieve, to help people better, that nobody's doing it on their own. And I think that's quite important as well, solidarity, to get, you know.
Normalizing situations as well, making people feel that whatever it is that's going on or whatever they're learning, it's normal, you know. You're not the first, you're not the last, but we'll get through this. And being able to educate people in a non-educational environment, I love that. Like I said before, I didn't have a great experience at school, so sitting in a classroom is not something that floats my boat at all. And the majority of the people that we work with, it doesn't float theirs either. So having, you know, realizing that education doesn't have to be classroom based, it can be one-on-one, and you know, helping and sharing information and skills and knowledge that way too.
Thank you. Has anybody else on the call got any questions they'd like to ask of the team? Any observations in relation to their own work? Apparently we can go a bit over should we need to, but let me open up the floor to see if anyone's got anything they'd like to chat about.
I'd just like to raise that. It's Patrick from Plymouth. About 8 years ago, we were charged to create a community economic development trust in the north of the city. And basically the council offered up a number of land and building assets, one of which was a derelict residential home in one of the poorer neighbourhoods of Plymouth. And the reason it worked was because as economic development officers, we had huge support from a dedicated neighbourhood regeneration team. So we had the time as well to actually go out into those neighbourhoods and engage with as wide-ranging number of people as possible to sort of see what their basic aspirations, what are the 3 things you'd like to happen or see in your area. And at the same time, it was trying to break down the barriers of perception, this residential home in one of the post-war villages. And it was just trying to educate people as well in terms of sort of through cooperation, the values of a cooperative, because what eventually happened, we managed to get a really dedicated group of people who eventually became a shadow board, and we educated them through, you know, taught them what the roles and responsibilities of being directors, and they were able to choose their status. And I have to say, if I had to do that all over again today, I think we would be really challenged, because unfortunately the equivalent team, they're now dealing sort of wholly with, well, largely with homeless people. There's not the capacity to have a neighbourhood warden or neighbourhood manager looking after the individual areas who's got the time to go and talk to these people. And we were very lucky sort of 6-7 years ago, but it's a huge task. And I take my hat off to Kate and Luci, you know, the stories you come up with, that's the fundamental from the grassroots, because how can you engage with people if people don't have that understanding? And we did have those staff before, but I fear, unless as economic development officers would go and do that, I can't see who else would. Sorry to ramble on.
No, I think it's a really important point about the vital importance of place, and the people that Kate and Luci work with are, you know, in the kind of top 10% of that neighbourhood in terms of need and demand. But actually we do see it as being really important that they're connecting back into that wider community as well, and hopefully that wider community just start to feel a bit safer when there's less crisis happening around them, the vibe changes, and that certainly happened in Chicot. But what we do have is one officer who's, as well as having a caseload like Kate and Luci, say his job is to engage with the whole community and go to the places where they go and go to the luncheon clubs and all of those spaces, because we see that as being crucial about that sense of place and how what we're doing fits in with all of that. So we do try and protect that important thing, Patrick. Yeah. But you're right, it'd be great for the whole team to do it.
Well, the good news is this co-op is now empowered and is now looking after not only its community, but has the skills to look after its asset, its building asset, which is a fantastic story, really.
Wonderful.
That really is fantastic. Thank you, Patrick. That's really, I mean, happy ending there, in a way, but obviously the tensions and the challenges. Paul Stewart, I think you had you were about to say something as well.
Yeah, well, look, probably 2 points here. One is first of all, apologies for missing part of the session due to the internet. But obviously, in relation to the staff within the council engaging with communities, which has been the main thread of this discussion, I get that. But I think one of you referenced that they identified with being a cooperator, which was an interesting comment. And clearly, you didn't just wake up one day and said, "I'm a cooperator." I'm interested in relation to that learning as yourself as an individual and how you came to that conclusion, that one, that process, because what I'm looking at in Sunderland is how we engage initially with that workforce, and we don't want to do something to them. It needs to be the workforce working with us to understand those values and for those values to take on to heart those values as you've identified. I don't know whether you can maybe expand on that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something in being a cooperative council that really helps with that. I can't really speak for everybody else, because I think, well, Kate, Luci and I we're not exceptions, but we're, you know, a lot of people who work in councils kind of move around from council to council, place to place. All three of us were born, have grown up, we work and live in the borough of Rochdale. We're really wedded to our own communities that we live in, and we're really wedded to ourselves as cooperators by virtue of that fact. We spend a lot of time in the vicinity of the original Pioneers Museum, and we do a lot of stuff with our colleagues in that museum, so it's really easy for that identity to seep in. But I think more formally in the kind of corporate world, it is through that kind of identity as the council, as a cooperative council, and understanding what that means, what is different about being a member of the workforce of a cooperative council compared to another, is about behaviours and kind of realising those behaviours. So our workforce development team do an awful lot of stuff to reinforce that identity.
Thank you. Did that illuminate for you, Paul?
It gives me some ideas about moving forward, I think, yes.
And without
you might be getting a phone call, Cilla.
But without being over purist, you know, because we can't all live these things every second of the day. I think one of the really exciting things for me about the growth and vibrancy of cooperative councils is that, you know, that principle 6, the concern, you know, the concern for community piece. You know, education, and 5 and 6, education and concern for community. And, you know, I mean, sometimes there's challenges to doing that, and it's not always straightforward, but that vision about work, I mean, you know, the Pioneers came about in response to need. That's why they came about, and what, you know, we've never had more need, well, there's always need, but, you know, so much so now, but also working in communities to try and address that is so huge now. So, you know, it gives us a sort of way in, doesn't it, to doing some of that work.
I think that story of the Pioneers is crucial, and it's understanding that story not as a heritage thing to be preserved and worshipped, but as a thing to live, of like, there's a problem, people from that community were sick of living that problem, and therefore some of them got together to help everybody to solve it. But the important thing was that everybody was part of the solution. And I think that story can be applied to so many problems that we face nowadays.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much. I'm just, has anybody else got a comment they'd like to make, or any observation they'd like to make? I think Helen very kindly said that there are some reports and so on, and resources available should anybody be interested. So, you know, that's possible. But anything else, or are you ready to go and have lunch? Virtual lunch.
It's not the same, is it?
Not really. No? Okay, right. Well, can I say thank you so much to Helen, Kate, and Lucy. I found it really interesting, and hats off, you know, for doing fantastic work every blooming day of the week. Thank you. And we'll save the chat and make that available. And there is a recording, as you know, being made of this. But thank you so much for those who've joined us.